Believe it or not, I actually really love the Old West. The spaghetti westerns, Red Dead Redemption, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and of course Blazing Saddles.
What in the wide world of sports is going on here?
Are all great games and movies that I love to watch and rewatch over and over again, so I was actually really excited when I saw Call of Juarez Gunslinger pop up on the new releases in the Steam store. The Call of Juarez series and the word competent haven't exactly had the best relationship over the past, but hopefully this arcadey $15 title would be at best a nice surprise, and at worst, still a fun little Western experience for some of us who are a bit slow. You know, those of us who are so obsessed with Western stuff that we actually defend South of Heaven, West of Hell as a good movie. Those of us with double-digit IQs. Those of us who didn't realize that the names Jesse and James from Pokemon was referencing Jesse James until I just said that right now. But I digress. The point is, Western things can be really good and substantial, but they can also be really bad if whoever is creating it focuses too much on pleasing fans rather than making a standalone experience. So I bought and played Gunslinger with cautionary optimism. Call of Juarez Gunslinger is a first-person shooter whose narrative follows the tales told by Silas Greaves, a bounty hunter in the Old West, as he hunts down Roscoe Bob Bryant because he... well, actually, you don't know what he did till more than halfway through the game. Whoever was writing the story distanced us so much from our main character by doing this for seemingly no good reason. By the time you learn his motivation, or really anything about him, you're already so close to the end of the game that you don't have any time to feel any sort of emotion because of it. Revealing tons of exposition late into the story only works if you have some awesome twist, like in the Shock games. If you keep a linear, predictable story, don't wait until the final 5 minutes to tell us why our main character has been doing everything he's been doing up until that point. There is a big overlying theme throughout the game, or at least the second half of it, and there's a decent story involving a good guy, a bad guy, and the gray bit in between, but in the end, this game isn't really about any of that. Rather than being original or creative with their story, what we have here isn't really about Silas Greaves or Roscoe Bob Bryant at all. Instead, it's about pleasing Western fans like myself by going, hey look, it's Billy the Kid, hey look, it's Curly Bill, or hey look, it's Butch Cassidy. Rather than making the game about its own story, instead it's about cramming every Western outlaw from the 19th century you possibly can into a loosely connected plot while still having it be somewhat believable. In all honesty, something like this can work, and if it does work, it'll be all the more amazing. But Gunslinger really falls off when it comes to having a coherent, exciting plot throughout the entire game. Because the developers had to, or at least felt they had to, keep their story historically accurate, there are some of the most anticlimactic scenes you'll ever experience in a video game. One moment you'll be dueling with the fastest duelist in the West, failing over and over trying to beat him while still making it out alive yourself, but when you eventually do send a bullet right between his eyes, you'll finish the level with background dialogue saying, oh, he actually didn't die there, he survived and was killed off 3 months later under a tree. The developers elongate the story with so many damn anticlimactic scenes. Silas will be telling his story, saying something like, and then I met Pat Garrett, and then someone else will chime in saying, did you kill him in a duel? Then you'll have to duel with him, restart if you die, over and over and over until eventually you beat him, where Silas will then say, no, all that happened was he hit me over the head with a frying pan. Then it will rewind and the duel will have never even happened. These situations are presented better than I just made them out to be, and they're kind of charming at first, but after going through them time and time again throughout the entire game, you just end up feeling frustrated by the end of it. But the real immersion killer is some of the boss fights. The ones that are duels are done really well, but half of them are just fighting bullet sponges with a famous name over its head. Emmett Dalton wasn't some huge mutant who can take 100 revolver rounds to the face before finally keeling over. Even though he did survive the famous Coffeeville bank robberies despite 23 bullet wounds, that's not a good enough excuse to satisfy me as a gamer when you have multiple bosses over and over who you can load nearly 100 slugs into their head without them keeling over until that health bar disappears. In all honesty, I could go on for hours about how insubstantial the story is. I mean, it's about as smooth and coherent as that terrain in that one level of Thomas Was Alone, but I should give mention to everything else in the game that kinda does make up for it. The art is amazing, the voice acting is pretty good, and above all, the gameplay actually has some really good bits with interesting new-ish and unique-ish talents, along with some really tight, satisfying shooter mechanics. There's an arcade mode and a dueling mode for those of you who'd rather not bother with the story, and in the end, I have to admit, as a shooter, it's fun. The weapon choice is somewhat limited, but still very logical. All the sounds are very satisfying, from the powerful kick of the guns to the splattering of your opponent's blood, and in the end, end, everything feels really nice, if you were to simply rate it as a shooter at least. But for $15, I'm going to have to ask for a little more than arcade and dueling modes. The story's presented in a cool way, and it's a pretty fun idea, but after a strong start out of the gate, it falls flat on its face in terms of a coherent plot, an immersive experience, and flat out not pissing off the player. If you're thick enough to be able to enjoy a game just because it has names of the same people as those awesome historical figures you learned about in 8th grade, then maybe you'll be able to enjoy it. It is just a little arcade game after all, and cheap smaller titles like these aren't exactly known for having stunning narratives. If you can suspend your disbelief, you'll probably still have an enjoyable shooter experience, but I can't wholeheartedly recommend this game, being the stubborn idiot I am when it comes to story. If you so much as begin to pay attention to it, you'll inevitably be taken out of the experience by all the hiccups throughout. Then again though, maybe I'm just being too critical of this little arcade game. Maybe I watched too much Zero Punctuation before writing this review. Or it could be I just think that there's better things you can spend your money on that are incidentally $5 cheaper. In the end though, Gunslinger can be a bit of fun if you're not the picky type who points out every inconsistency, flaw, and issue the story has. I could just be judging it harshly because of the lack of emotion that it brought out in me compared to other games, but I shouldn't expect that much from something that costs less than $30, I guess. Then again though, you can get the Walking Dead game for $25 and that'll leave a child more emotionally drained than their parents getting divorced.